Okay, sorry, I'm running a little late here. All righty, Jonathan Cohen is not. All right, Adriana. Yeah, you're here in the flesh. And Tommy, I saw Tommy, didn't I? Yeah. And Shanice here. And Valerie. Here you are. Valerie's here. Maya's here. Isn't Maya here? No. But she's not here. And Alex, you're there on the other side of the screen. And Joseph is here. And Nadia is here. And Valeria is here. And Kay is over there. Okay. So only Maya is missing. All right, let's and again, just a second here. I just need to try and fix this. What's going on? Okay. All right. This week, the Torah portion continues with the story of the conflict between Moshe, or more specifically, between God and Paro. And it opens up with a very interesting statement. God spoke to Moses and said to him, I am Ani Adonai. Right? Uses the Yud He Vav He name of God. And I appeared unto Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai. Right? El Shaddai means Almighty God, the God that is sufficient. Ushmi Adonai, but my name of Adonai, Lo Nadati Lahem. I was not known to them by that name. Okay? Now, those who are into the documentary hypothesis, I don't know what's going on my screen here. Documentary hypothesis point out this seems to imply that the name of Yud He Vav He was completely unknown to them. Right? So Rashi, as are many of the traditional commentaries, hold on, I seem to be going all over the map here on this screen. I don't know what's going on. I had the same problem last night in my home computer. Oh, well. All right. So Rashi says, in building on a Jewish tradition, that the various names that are associated with God often represent various aspects of God. That the name, when used Elohim, has a meaning of strict, of justice, of judgment. Indeed, there are places in the Torah where we interpret the word Elohim not to refer to God, but to judges. And the name Yud He Vav He is God's as the merciful one, God showing kindness. And if you remember, in Genesis, we have that same issue because in the first chapter of Genesis, of Bereshit, Vayar Elohim, it says, only uses the name of God as Elohim. Not until the second chapter does the Yud He Vav He name of God get introduced. And again, so Jewish tradition sees that as indicating that originally God meant to create the world solely with the attribute of justice, of strict justice, but then he realized people aren't going to survive if it's only strict justice. And so we combine the Yud He Vav He, the God as merciful, with the name of God, which indicates his strict judgment. I'm going to pass the roll around for attendance at services this week. So anyway, so what Rashi, as Rashi explains through it, what God is telling Moshe is that he made lots of promises to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. They have not yet been fulfilled. And now they will be fulfilled. The God, Yud He Vav He, God's aspect of kindness, of mercy, is going to fulfill those promises that were made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then we have a listing of the heads. And then now we begin with this struggle. God says to Moses, go tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites depart from his land. All right, but Moses is God, but they're not listening. He's not listening to me. So that's the introduction to the struggle. So God says to Moses, say to Aaron, strike the Lord says, Moses, Pharaoh is stubborn, if he's let the people go to Pharaoh in the morning, he's coming out to the water, and station yourself before him at the edge of the Nile, taking with you the rod that turned into a snake. And say to him, the Lord, the God of Hebrews, sent me to you to say, let my people go that they may worship me in the wilderness. But you have paid no heed until now. Thus says the Lord, by this shall you know that I am the Lord. See, I shall strike the water in the Nile with the rod that is in my hand, and it will be turned into blood. And the fish in the Nile will die. The Nile will stink so that the Egyptians will find it impossible to drink the water of the Nile. And then God tells Moses, tell Aaron to go and do this. And so the first plague, the plague of blood, takes place. A couple of things I want to say on this. First of all, while God at first seems to imply that Moshe is going to be the direct cause of the plague, instead, his brother Aaron is the agent for bringing about the plague. And indeed, that is the case with the next two plagues that take place. And the rabbis explained that when it comes to the Nile River, the Nile had saved Moses when he was a baby. He was placed in the Nile. It would be like a sign of ingratitude for Moses to cause damage to the Nile River. So therefore, it was given to Aaron to do that. Similarly, the next two plagues are associated with the dust of Egypt. And since Moses had hidden the Egyptian that he killed in the dust of Egypt, the dirt of Egypt, again, it would be improper for Moses to be the one who is causing a plague through the dirt, the earth of Egypt. And so Aaron performs those actions. Again, that's how the rabbis try to understand what's taking place. And then, of course, we go through a series of plagues. There's the blood, Dam, Sardea, Kinim, the blood, the frogs, the lice. As we go through these various plagues, reaching to at the end of the chapter of hail, Dam, Sardea, Kinim, Arav, Dever, Shkin, Arbe. All right, so the beginning of the 10 plagues. Now, one of the efforts that is often made is to try and see these plagues as natural phenomena. Right? A lot of ink has been wasted on trying to figure out exactly, well, there was this infestation of some kind of bacterial infestation in the Nile River. The Nile River turns red and it becomes just like red tide in Florida. You're talking about Florida, the red tide there. And that causes the fish to die and the frogs to get out of the water. And when the fish die, these bugs come into being, and et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, the reason for that, of course, is the assumption that you cannot have supernatural events, that God doesn't intervene into the world. So that's the reason why, since the Torah speaks of it, the assumption is that we have to find a rational explanation. Okay. Another way of looking at it, though, is even if, and indeed we see sometimes even the Torah seems to indicate certain natural elements in some of these plagues. That it's the wind that brings the locusts, it's the wind that takes the locusts away, which of course is how that comes about. So that it could be that the understanding is, yeah, these are relatively natural phenomena, but you know, they come at the right moment. And so that's the hand of God being brought into the story, that it's not necessarily that these are supernatural events, although some of the plagues seem to be that way, especially the killing of the firstborn. I don't know how you come up with a natural explanation for that, but nonetheless, there are those who prefer to see nature taking its normal course. But as we know, what's the story, of a butterfly does its wings down in South America and cause a tornado in Kansas, that sort of thing, so, if that indeed is true, of just a little change can cause things to happen, who's to say that that's not impossible, that things aren't possible, okay? So be that as it may, we go with that. Okay, now we are working on our Hebrew. Everybody have a text tonight? And by chance tonight, I managed to remember to bring extra. All right. We had gotten through the letter Tzadi and Chet, and we had, I just want to especially review on page 29. We did 29, but I know we did 29, but I just want to reiterate, or as my daughter would insist, I want to iterate that what we did on page 29, so I can reiterate what we did on page 29. She's very pedantic on that. She says, iterate means to repeat. Reiterate means you're repeating again. Pedantic? Yeah. I want to show how erudite I am in using very fancy language. That would also, those would be good words. In Scrabble, sure. But in Wordle, you can only use all right. Try to use alien for, I've been very lucky with alien for Wordle. Okay. So just to remind you, when the letter Chet, yeah, get that out of your throat. Yeah, I know it's tough. If you don't come from an area where the gutturals like that are used, it's very hard to adapt it. I can't do the rolling R's. I'm not very good at Reish. You speak French, right? French, they have the R's that roll, right? So what can I do? So anyway, when the Chet comes at the end of a word, and it has the patach, the straight line vowel under it, you will pronounce the vowel first, followed by the sound of the letter Chet. All right? And that was because even Hebrew speakers had some issues with having a different sound preceding the Chet at the end of a word. All right, so like on line number 5, the words mo'ach, lehit, pateach, lehit, pateach, petucha. Anybody know what the word petach means? An opening. All right, an opening. Pticha is an opening. Liftoach is to open up. All right, so when do you open the store? All right, so let's turn over to page 30. We will review together. This is all the letters we've gotten to so far. Okay, everybody there? Okay, line number 1. We read etzba rachetz tarutz porates leaf roats. Line number 2. Noach heiniach mincha chatzitz ruach rucha. Okay, line number 3. Lech lecha tzon Som, Son, Som, Sameh. Okay, line number 4. Yafeh, Yefet, Yaft. Now notice it's got to be, the second shva has got to be pronounced. When you have 2 shvas in a row, the second shva is going to be pronounced. First one will be silent, the second pronounced. So yaft. All right, the next word, ya'eh, yagia. Okay. Line number 5. Gamarti, Gamarta, Gamart, Gemarten, Gamru. Now, I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but in modern Hebrew, they prefer to use the word siam to complete something. There's a certain
Because the monkey has a
sexual connotation, right? It's become to have a sexual connotation.
but that's only a recent.
Yeah, it's a recent phenomenon. Look, I mentioned it before. There are words in the Torah and also in other books of the Bible that are written one way, but we pronounce them a different way. Totally different word. It means the same thing. But apparently at a later period of history, the first word became more suspect. The word for hemorrhoid. Let's see if I can find it right. I don't know it offhand. It's not one of the words that I in my stock and trade. Not, first of all, in one of the curses,
Is this one of the plagues?
one of the plagues that would come about for not listening to God was hemorrhoids. Now, if you didn't listen to God, let me find. Oh, so Samuel, 1 Samuel or 2 Samuel? Please.
That's why we're still talking about it.
What? They spent a lot of time in the Talmud worrying about getting hemorrhoids. Ancient people were always worried about your bowel movements. There it is. Well, I don't know. Okay. Where is it? An important piece of information you should know. Good, because I can't find it right offhand real quickly. I'm sure I'll come across it later when I'm not looking. Oh, here we go. Oh, the ark of the Lord remained in the territory of the Philistines 7 months, and the Philistines summoned they had gotten it from the Israelites as a result of a battle. And in the previous chapter, it says, for the panic of death pervade the whole city so heavily that the hand of God fallen there. And it says, and the men who did not die were stricken with hemorrhoids. Now, in the Bat Chorim, however, that's the way we read it. Bat Chorim. It's not a tav, it's not tachat. It's not tachat. All right, but anyway, in the original word was spelled bet, bet is a prefix. Ayin Pei Lamed, Yud Mem, Afalim. And that apparently became somewhat vulgar. We have the same in Yishkavenu and Yishkalenu, I think the word is. We're talking about, well, it's both of those talking about having sexual relations, but in a forced manner. All right. So again, we have then apparently, just like Gamarti has become verboten somewhat, Yishkalenu became verboten in the Bible. Okay. I know we don't need the back to the more practical Hebrew. Yeah, Well, the back of the Hebrew school bus, when I was a kid, we looked up what's the feminine for a dog, what do you do when you're 8 years old? Yeah. Okay, line number six, verb forms actually. Nif al, hif il, heat pa el, hu al, hoof al. Those are all names of grammatical constructs of verbs, for those who are interested. Line number 7. Chai, chayim, bayit, beit, ayil. Okay, line number 8. Boche, choche, ba'a, chayalim. Line 9. Melech, surcha, rotzei ach, rachamim, yinachem. Line 10. Amart, pilpel, milachim, lechem. By the way, if you want a sharp falafel, you order with pilpel. Pilpelim, peppers.
Oh.
And charif is okay. So now the next letter we're going to look at is the letter shin. The letter shin has a dot on the top right hand corner when vowels are written. Okay, and that distinguishes it from the letter sin that we'll come across in a little bit, which has the dot on the left side. They're related to each other, and I don't know how that works out, but that's the reality. So if the dot is on the right-hand side at the top, it is going to be a shin. Now, normally, we'll come to it. All right, well, we have an example later at the end of this lesson. We'll come to that then. Okay, so line number 1. Sh, she, 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 shu, sho. Line number 2. Shar, shame, sheen, shum, shots, shelcha, shuf. Line number 3. Sheer, sharim, shalem, lashon, shana, shoresh. Line number 4. I'm sorry, let's stop there for a moment. Notice there are 2 dots on that shin. We've been introduced to the O sound vowel when it's a dot on top of a letter, right? It could be standalone, all right? Like on line number 3 in the previous page, the next, the 1, 2, 3, third word on line 3 on page 30 is tzom, right? The dot there tells you it's an O. Here, now, when it comes to shoresh, there are 2 dots on that shin. There's nothing comes before it, so the first dot is to tell you it's a shin. So now what is the purpose of the second dot? That's to tell you it's an O. Okay. So when you have 2 dots, the second dot is going to be an O in this case. All right. Let's go down now to line number 4. Shalom, shalemim, shechem, shibur, busha. Okay. Line number 5. Meet bayesh, meet rachetz, Mit Bayeshet Rasha Moshe. Now, this is what I was alluding to the beginning. You only have one dot here. There is no vowel associated with the letter mem here. If that dot's for just the shin, what vowel does the mem have? You can't have a consonant without a vowel. So the dot has to indicate that that's the O vowel. But here it's serving two purposes. It's serving at the purpose to tell you it's mo, and then the next letter is sh, Moshe. Now that was done up until the modern era. In the last, I think, 40 years or so, because it's been easier to typeset and expand upon it. Most Sidurim, if they have like the word Moshe, you'll find in the Chumash, there will be two dots there. One dot for the mem and one dot for the shin. Makes life a lot easier. If you look in the Koran Sidur, that's the way they always do it. The Art Scroll Sidur, that's the way they always do it. Older Sidurim do not necessarily put in the two dots. So when you look at a word, always remember, every letter has to be associated with a vowel, either before or after it. Okay? You can't have a consonant standing alone without some relationship to a vowel. So with Moshe, the mem, the only vowel possible that's spelled out here, since we do have dots, is mo. And the next one, the shin, since we don't have dots on the left, must mean that dot on the right is to tell you it's Moshe. Okay. All right. And he also, they say to note there that we have what they call the chataf patach. All right. That's when you have the patach, it's a straight line, and what looks like a shva right next to it. So like the word at the bottom of the page, asher. You pronounce it just like it's as if those two dots weren't there. There are grammatical reasons for that, but we're not going to go into it, okay? So, and asher means who or that. Asher kidshanu. All right. Yeah, let's do one more letter tonight. Next page. The letter kuf. The letter kuf, as in the word kidshanu, has the value of letter K. Okay, just like the letter K. It will always be pronounced the same way. And if you see a transliteration and the letter Q is used in the transliteration, that's instead of the kuf. Usually most of the time it's K, but in scientific and a lot of times in Israel, they use the letter Q to indicate the letter kaf. Okay? Just like kappa. Right? The Greek kappa, kuf is the same thing, same letter, just slightly different naming. Okay, so always a K sound. So line number 1, we have ka, ke, ku, ko, ki, kai, ki. Line number 2, kar, kor, kash, kam, kots, kuf, takein. Line number 3, letakein, takana, tikun, yakun, yafe, koshi. Line number 4, kai, yam, kayam, keshet, Boker Rachok. Line number 5. Karen Machon Mechonit Kayemet Shoshana. Shoshana. And Shoshana is a common name. It's debated what it really means. Lily is probably the original meaning for the flower lily. Okay. Line number 6. Porates Tzafon Negba Tzalachat Lekach Yitzchak. Line 7. Likrat Leaf Roats Konim Liknot Takumi. And now they tell you about the dot having 2 uses for like the word Moshe, which we had the previous page. I should have said something earlier. Okay. Tonight, we are going to look at the prophets. Just out here. Now, the idea of a prophet, of course, is intrinsic to the biblical world. Intrinsic. You can't think of the Bible without thinking about prophecy. According to tradition, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, was the first of the Nevi'im, the first of the prophets. But of course, we know there are others are mentioned are prophets as well. Actually, and sometimes Abraham is referred to as a prophet. And in the Bible, we have the 3 major prophets are some that we think of as Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. Those 3 are the largest books in the section that is the prophets. Then we have the Treyasar, the 12 so-called minor prophets. They're called the minor prophets only because their books are shorter. Okay? Isaiah has more than 60 chapters in it. We have glimpses in the book of Samuel talking about prophetic groups. Men, it sounds like it was just men, but it could have been women as well, it's not clear, who went around and seemed to have had ecstatic moments. Indeed, there's a story with King Saul before he becomes king of him coming into contact with a group of men who are these prophets. There were many more prophets than we have names for. There were probably a lot of prophetical works that did not survive. They probably were all, in general, oral originally, and only later written down. Indeed, we have in the story of Jeremiah an example of it being written down. And they all claim to speak for God. Ko Amar Hashem, thus saith the Lord. And we're going to look at the problem that creates later on when we look at Jeremiah in a little detail. But we also seem to have indicated that music and nocturnal visions were elements of the prophet's life. Probably most of the prophecies come to the prophet at nighttime, come to them in dreams. And if we see them as dreams, we can see how the various imagery has to be interpreted sometimes in order to understand what they're trying to say. But there's also a certain element that stands out when we read about the prophets. Tell me I didn't bring the other sheet. I didn't. I ran it off. I'll have to. I know I had it all together. Of course. All right, I will have to reconstruct some of it because I only have some of the material here. Moses is said to be the chief of the prophets, the first of the prophets, the chief of the prophets. He serves as a paradigm for all later prophets. But the Torah makes explicit that his prophecy was far above that of any other prophet, because he spoke face to face to God, whatever that means. But it's spelled out, it's not in visions, it's not in dreams. And if we look at the story of Moshe, we see certain things that come about. First of all, there's a vision, right? The burning bush. Secondly, there's an issue of speech. Moshe can't speak very well. He's heavy-tongued. There is some kind of repair that is done in order to eliminate that particular issue. And so for Moshe, God says that Aaron will be your spokesperson. And then there is commissioning a mission to the prophet. Go down, Moses, let my people go. And there is a reluctance spelled out on the part of the prophet to perform this duty. Okay. Now, when we look at the major prophets, because we have spelled out for the prophet, these major prophets, parallel structures with everything I just shared with you. All right. In chapter 6 of Isaiah, we have what the Bible critics call the inaugural vision of Isaiah. We're told it was in the year that King Uzziah died. I beheld my Lord seated on a high and lofty throne, and the skirts of his robe filled the temple. We don't know if it's an earthly temple or heavenly temple. We can't know for sure if this is a vision when he's awake or asleep. I'm suggesting probably was a sleeping vision. Seraphs stood in attendance on him. That's kinds of angelic beings. Each of them had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his legs, and with 2 he would fly. And one would call the other, holy, 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 kadosh, 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 anoisvot mohoretz kivodo. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. His presence fills all the earth. So you have with Moshe, the burning bush. You have with Isaiah, this vision in the temple with angelic beings. Moshe also had an angelic being in the bush mentioned there. The doorpost would shake at the sound of the one who called, and the house kept filling with smoke. I cried, woe is me, I am lost, for I'm a man of unclean lips. May at my own eyes have beheld the King, Lord of hosts. Okay, so he says, now we have something about mouth and speech, unclean lips. Then one of the seraphs flew over to me with a live coal, which he had taken from the altar, with a pair of tongues. He touched it to my lips and declared, now that this has touched your lips, your guilt shall depart and your sin be purged away. So we have the vision, issue of the mouth and the repair of that mouth so that he can serve God. And then we have, we're told that he was afraid. That was a little bit earlier when the doorpost would shake at the sound of one who called and the house kept filling with smoke. I cried, woe is me, I am lost, because I am a man of unclean lips. So we also have this idea of fear that is expressed. Moshe also was afraid when he was told that this is holy ground that you're standing on, take off your shoes. It says Moshe was afraid. Then I heard the voice of my Lord saying, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And I said, here I am, send me. So slight difference with Isaiah, different from the other prophets, is that Isaiah is willing to take the job. God says, I need an emissary, and Isaiah says, okay, send me. Okay. So those parallels, I think, are important to tell us that there's a certain vision of how a prophet must come into being. The prophet must be entrusted with a mission from God. The prophet in general is supposed to be reluctant. The prophet is supposed to have some kinds of issues that stand in the way, and then God takes care of those problems. Right now, I want to turn to the second of the major prophets, his inaugural vision, Jeremiah. And this is at the very beginning of the book of Jeremiah. The words of Jeremiah, son of Hilkiah, one of the priests at Anatot in the territory of Benjamin. The word of the Lord came to him in the days of King Josiah, son of Ammon of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. So we're given a time frame. All the prophets, pretty much, we give a time frame when they are active. And throughout the days of King Jehoiakim, son of Josiah of Judah, and until the end of the 11th year, King Tzidkiyahu, son of Josiah of Judah, when Jerusalem went into exile in the 5th month. The word of the Lord came to me. Before I created you in the womb, I selected you. Before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet concerning the nations. This is the commission of him as a prophet. So what does Jeremiah respond to that mission? I replied, Lord God, I don't know how to speak, for I am still a boy. I'm too young. I don't have the requisite skills in order to serve as your agent to speak on your behalf. So it's not that he's unclean lips. It's not that he stutters or whatever the problem was with Moshe, but he still has a problem. He can't speak, whatever the basis that is. And the Lord said to me, do not say I am still a boy, but go wherever I send you and speak whatever I command you. Have no fear of them, for I am with you to deliver you, declares the Lord. The Lord put out his hand and touched my mouth. The Lord said to me, herewith I put my words into your mouth. So instead of the angel with a coal touching the lips, God, as it were, takes his hand, touches the lips of Jeremiah, thus repairing the problem that Jeremiah had with his lips. See, I appoint you this day over nations and kingdoms to uproot and pull down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. Right? The word of the Lord came to me. What do you see, Jeremiah? So now we have a vision. So the order is not exactly the same, but yet he's envisioning seeing God or being addressed by God, even if it's not we don't have a clear picture of anything that he sees, but now we do have a vision. The word of the Lord came to me and said, what do you see? I see a steaming pot tipped away from the north. And the Lord said to me, from the north shall disaster break loose upon the inhabitants of the land, for I am summoning all the peoples of the kingdoms of the north, declares the Lord. She says, yeah, that's a pot. It's tilting from the north because destruction is going to come to the Jewish state, Judah, from the north, which indeed was the normal way of invasion of the land of Israel. And I will argue my case against them for all their wickedness. They have forsaken me and sacrificed to other gods and worship the works of their hands. So gird up your loins, arise and speak to them, and all I command you, do not break down before them, lest I break you before them. All right, and he goes on to say, this kind of thing. All right, I skipped, he also had another vision. I skipped that one, the vision of a branch of an almond tree. So he has two visions giving him his commission. He's hesitant at first. He claims he can't speak, but God cures him of that problem, and God commissions him to be his prophet. Okay? So the last of the three major prophets, Ezekiel, Yechezkel, he has a very fantastic opening inaugural vision. And I'm only going to, I suggest you read the first three chapters of Ezekiel if you haven't read them for tonight, which you should have. Ezekiel's book opens in the 30th year. All right, we don't know exactly what that's referring to. On the 5th day of the 4th month, when I was in the community of exiles by the Chebar Canal, the heavens opened and I saw visions of God. Okay, so he tells us it's the 30th year, but we're not quite sure what that means. It's the 5th month, the 5th day of the 4th month. So Nisan, Sivan, Iyar, where am I going? Tammuz, all right, that's 4th month, and 5th month would be Av, the month of destruction. All right, no, I didn't write. Nisan, ERC, Tevech, no, I'm running out, have my grandson give me the years. Okay, anyway, so we're given a time. 5th day of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Yehoiachin. So this gives us a time frame, a better time frame. The first line of the 30th year, we don't know what it's referring to. But here it says the 5th day of the month. It was the 5th year of the exile of King Yehoiachin. The word of the Lord came to the priest Ezekiel, son of Buzi, by the Chebar Canal in the land of the Chaldeans, and the hand of the Lord came upon him there. So we're told that Yechezkel, Ezekiel, is with the exiles in Babylonia by the Chebar Canal. The Babylonians followed the Assyrian practice of exiling at least major elements of a country that they had conquered. And since Judah had revolted against Babylonian rule, when they crushed the Judean state, they exiled in a series of exiles leadership of the state. I looked, and lo, a stormy wind came sweeping out of the north. Now we have our vision. A huge cloud and flashing fire surrounded by radiance. And in the center of it, in the center of the fire, a gleam as of amber. In the center of it are also figures of 4 creatures, and this was their appearance. They had figures of human beings. However, each had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings. The legs of each were fused into a single rigid leg. The feet of each were like a single calf's hoof. And their sparkle was like the luster of burnished bronze. They had human hands below their wings. The 4 of them had their faces and their wings on their 4 sides. Each one's wings touched those of the other. They did not turn when they moved. Each would move in the direction of any of its faces. And he goes on, they have they have 4 faces: a human face, a face of a lion, a face of an ox, and a face of an eagle. And then there's this whole vision with their rings, and the rings have eyes. Read through it. And as far as I know, LSD was not known at that time, so we can't say he was high on drugs. But in any case, this is the vision of what is called in rabbinic tradition, the chariot of God, Ma'aseh Merkavah, in one of the sources of early Kabbalistic mystical study was to try and analyze what all of these things mean in this Merkavah. So finally, it says, after he goes through all of this, I flung myself down. This was the appearance of the semblance of the presence of the Lord. When I beheld it, I flung myself down on my face, and I heard the voice of someone speaking. All right, so he's afraid, throws himself down, and he hears a voice speaking. He said to me, "O mortal, stand up on your feet that I may speak to you." As he spoke to me, a spirit entered into me and set me upon my feet. and I heard what was being spoken to me. He said to me, O mortal, I am sending you to the people of Israel, that nation of rebels who rebelled against me. They, as well as their fathers, have defied me to this very day, for the sons are brazen of face and stubborn of heart. I send you to them, and you shall say to them, thus said the Lord God, whether they listen or not, for they are a rebellious breed, that they may know that there was a prophet among them. And you, mortal, do not fear them, and do not fear their words. Though thistles and thorns press against you, and you sit upon scorpions, do not be afraid of their words, and not be dismayed by them, though they are a rebellious breed. But speak my words to them, whether they listen or not, for they are rebellious. And you, mortal, heed what I say to you. Do not be rebellious like that rebellious breed. Open your mouth and eat what I'm giving you. As I looked, there was a hand stretched out to me holding a written scroll. He unrolled it before me. It was inscribed on both the front and back. On it were written lamentations, dirges, and woes. He said to me, mortal, eat what is offered to you on this scroll and go speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth and gave him the scroll to me. Mortal, feed your stomach, fill your belly with this scroll that I give you. I ate it, and it tasted as sweet as honey to me. Okay. So again, we have many of the same elements that we found with Moshe, with Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, and now Yechezkel. Visions, indications of problems of speech in some way, some kind of curing of that problem, a mission to bring, in the case of Moshe, to free the Jewish people. Case of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, it's basically to deal with the rebellious people who don't follow God's course of, that he's told them to do. Okay. So we see that relationship. And it's also important to note that the role of the prophet is not to be a fortune teller. You know, we think of prophecy today, think of prophets that tell the future. Well, that may be involved in their dealings. The role of the prophet is to tell the people you have to observe the rules of the Torah, the rules of God. In the traditional way of understanding it, you have the Torah, the people are disobeying the Torah, especially with idolatry, and the prophets come along not to say something new, but to reinforce, one, you can't worship idols. Two, your worship has to also include your proper behavior, not to mistreat the poor, defenseless. They're not creating something new. They are reinforcing part and parcel of Jewish tradition. The biblical critics who want to say that the Torah comes later than the prophets say this begins with the prophets and then gets degraded later on. That's the Wellhausen anti-Semitic school of thought when it comes to understanding the Jewish, the Bible. But their major purpose, as we see in each one of them, is to tell the people they have to follow God's rules. Now, they do have some times where they are called upon to express predictions of the future or signs of God's care. And I want to look at one of the most important ones and the most controversial ones, chapter 7 of the book of Yeshayahu, book of Isaiah. All right, now remember, if you haven't read the history, the period of time of Isaiah is 8th century BCE. Interestingly enough, I was just listening to a podcast talking about the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which was at its heyday then. All right? The Assyrian Empire conquered the largest territory of any empire up until that date and time. It spread all the way from Egypt up to the Caucasus in the north, into Turkey, and into Iran, Iraq, in that area. So it was a very vicious punishing kind of empire. If you revolted, the punishment could be very severe. And during Isaiah's time, the northern tribes are conquered by Assyria. Samaria is destroyed. The people are exiled, hence the 10 lost tribes. Following normal Assyrian policy, they exiled large masses of the people, took them away from where they were, substituted other settlers for where they had been, so that there was not that connection with the land and less likely to revolt against the Assyrian rule. Okay? So this is during the time of Ahaz, and this is before Israel has been destroyed by the Neo-Assyrian Empire. It says, in the reign of Ahaz, son of Yotam, son of Uzziah, king of Judah, King Rezin of Aram and King Pekach, son of Remaliah of Israel, marched upon Jerusalem to attack it, but they were not able to attack it. Okay, so there's a siege being brought against Jerusalem. I'm going to have to skip over a lot of this. And Isaiah says, thus said my Lord my God, it shall not succeed. It shall not come to pass. For this chief city of Aram is Damascus, and the chief of Damascus is Rezin. The chief city of Ephraim is Samaria, and the chief of Samaria is the son of Remaliah. And in another 65 years, Ephraim shall be shattered as a people. If you will not believe, for you cannot be trusted. So as he says, in 65 years, the northern kingdom will be destroyed. So the Lord spoke further to Ahaz. Now, is God talking to Ahaz? It seems that this is really the prophet speaking. So the prophet sees himself and records it as him speaking for God. Ask for a sign from the Lord your God anywhere down in Sheol or up to the sky. But Ahaz replied, I will not ask, and I will not test the Lord. Okay? So there's bad blood between Isaiah and Ahaz. It's not clear why in this passage he is saying, I don't need a sign. It sounds like I'm a pious person, I don't need a sign, but that's not really what's going on. Because Isaiah's retort says, listen, house of David, isn't it enough for you to treat men as helpless that you should also treat my God as helpless? Assuredly, my Lord will give you a sign of his own accord. Okay, he's going to give him a sign to prove that Isaiah really is the prophet. God's word's going to come true. Now listen, this is the important part. Assuredly, my Lord will give you a sign of his own accord. Look, the young woman is with child and about to give birth to a son. Let her name him Emmanuel. Emmanuel means God is with us. By the time he learns to reject the bad and choose the good, people will be feeding on curds and honey. For before the lad knows to reject the bad and choose the good, the ground whose two kings you dread shall be abandoned. The Lord will cause to come upon you and all your people and your ancestral house such days as never come since Ephraim turned away from Judah, that self-same king of Assyria. All right? And he goes on in these lines. Now, what is the sign? The sign is there's this young woman here, unnamed. She's pregnant. She's going to have a child. And before that child is 2, 3, 4 years of age, you don't have to worry about what's happening out there. Now, when this is translated into Greek, into the Septuagint, the Hebrew word, which here is alma, which means a young woman of a certain age, okay? It is translated into the word that in Hebrew would be Betula, virgin. Thus, the prophecy of the virgin birth comes from the lines of Isaiah. But when you look at it, first of all, in context, it's a question whether or not that's a correct translation. Secondly, he's talking to King Ahaz in the year 750, 760, whatever exact dating it is. How would it be a sign that some nearly 800 years later, a virgin is going to give birth to a child? How's that going to be much of a sign to King Ahaz? Something's going to happen way, 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 way in the future? Why would you give such a sign? So I do have, at home, I have a Bible, English translation Bible put out by the Catholic Church, and they recognize that the original passage here is not the way it's cited in the New Testament. But they say maybe the prophet could have, two things at the same time. He's talking about something then and something later on. That's how they try and deal with it. The point being, when you go through many, and Isaiah is a very popular source for the Christian Bible's interpretations for the coming of the Messiah in the shape of Jesus, you will find almost all the time, they're taken out of context. They are often mistranslated. And if they are messianic, and some of those, the Jewish tradition says they're messianic as well, there's no reason to associate them with Jesus. Plus, when we talk about, the Mashiach, the Messiah is going to come into Jerusalem riding on a white donkey. If you know that's the prophecy and you want to proclaim yourself as the Mashiach, the Messiah, what do you do to hire a donkey to ride into Jerusalem? You'll get a white donkey. So the fact that he rides in on a white donkey doesn't in itself prove anything other than the fact that they knew of that prophecy. All right. Now, the first chapters of Isaiah talk about during the time before the destruction of the Jewish state of Judah. He lives way before then. The later chapters have lots of passages that seem to indicate that the exile has taken place. And it meant as comfort. Nachamu, nachamu ami, be comforted, my people. And it talks about all kinds of good things that are coming, and these marvelous visions of a rebuilt Jerusalem, and instead of stones, you have marvelous precious stones for the foundations, what have you. Okay? These beautiful visions, a lion lying down with the lamb. Okay? So biblical critics, again, of the non-Jewish world, and even some in the Jewish world, assume that when we have the book of Isaiah, we really have two or even three different books that were put together. There's the book of Isaiah, which is associated with the prophet Isaiah, a later work that was written much later, after the time of the destruction, that was hopeful for the future, from second Isaiah, and maybe even a third Isaiah in there as well. On the other hand, if prophets are capable of predicting the future, why couldn't they predict what's going to take place later on? And he offers predictions here. So you're not forced into that interpretation, although there's language and differences between the different passages. There's also discussion, when he says the lion will lie down with the lamb, there's the famous story that in the Jerusalem Zoo, there's a cage with a lion and a lamb, quoting Isaiah. And people marvel at this. How is it that the lion and the lamb can share this cage together? So they asked one of the zookeepers one day, says, very easy. Every morning we put in a new lamb. The reason I'm saying that is that Maimonides, the rationalist, says don't take these kinds of prophecies literally. They're figurative. It'll be an era of peace. It doesn't mean lions and lambs are going to lie down with each other. And all the other kinds of imagery of that era. It just means it's going to be better, but it'll still be the world as we more or less know it. That's the Rambam's take on it. Now, others take it literally. And so they see the age of the Messiah as a very miraculous kind of time. So those are both found, and depending on how you read it, in Isaiah. I just want to point out, and we did it on Yom Kippur, the Haftarah that we read for Yom Kippur opens up with condemnation of Israel, saying, is this the fast that I wanted? Is it, to offer animals without caring? Isn't it to feed the hungry, the clothed, the naked, to do all the kinds of things that people need? So it opens up with saying the ritual by itself is not worth it unless you have this aspect of it as well. But then after he goes through that, he says, but if you observe the Sabbath and don't do business on the Shabbat, he now turns to a very ritualistic emphasis. So they're both brought together in the words of the prophet. Not to eliminate the ritual, but not to allow the ritual to be empty performance. But it has to be backed up with your concern for others. All right. Jeremiah has one of the most difficult roles of the prophets. He lives at a time when he can see the coming destruction of the Jewish state. He is appointed, as we said, when I read about his appointment, that it was going to be difficulty. So, for example, in chapter 5, he says, proclaim this to the house of Jacob and announce it in Judah. Hear this, O foolish people, devoid of intelligence, that have eyes but can't see, that have ears but can't hear. Should you not revere me, says the Lord? Should you not tremble before me, who set the sand as a boundary to the sea, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They have turned aside and gone their way. They have not said to themselves, let us revere the Lord our God, who gives the rain, the early and late rain in season, who keeps for our benefit the weeks appointed for harvest. It's in your iniquities that have diverted these things. Your sins have held a bounty from you. This is the Deuteronistic vision. Jeremiah is emphasizing what we find in the book of Deuteronomy, Sefer Devarim, that your behavior affects the world around you. Can even have effect on when rain's going to come or not, whether you take it literally or not. The point is, he's saying you can't expect God to treat you in a kind manner when you reject what he wants. And so he is prophesying against the policies that were being followed by the ruling authorities of his day, especially after the death of Josiah. And we see that there is clearly a feeling existing amongst the people of Israel at that time that Jerusalem cannot be conquered and destroyed because the house of God is in Jerusalem, the temple. There's clearly, runs through the story of Jeremiah, this idea that God will make sure nothing happens to his beloved city. So now we have this, the Neo-Assyrian Empire has been destroyed. The Babylonian Empire has come up in its stead. King Nebuchadnezzar is building up his empire. Judah can either submit or go against it. I suppose it would be, in today's terms, not what it was in 1812, but in today's terms, if the United States said to Ottawa, give us this part of Canada, most likely the Canadians would probably have to give in, whether they like to or not, because of the overwhelming power that's there. So it's not really a great bit of political prognostication to say it's better off submitting to Babylonian rule and paying whatever you have to pay in taxes and tribute to Babylonia, rather than going against Babylonia and siding with the Egyptians who are fighting against Babylonia. All right? But that's not what the leadership wants to hear. That year, early in the reign of King Sidkiyahu of Judah, in the 5th month of the 4th year, now listen to this description. The prophet Hananiah, son of Azor, who was for Gibeon, spoke to me in the house of the Lord in the presence of the priests and all the people. So they're gathered at the Beit HaMikdash, at the temple. The man is known as a prophet, Hananiah. He and Jeremiah are having a bit of an argument with everybody surrounding him. He said, thus said the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, I hereby break the yoke of the king of Babylon. In 2 years, I will restore to this place all the vessels of the house of the Lord, which King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon took from this place and brought to Babylon. Okay, he says, already the temple has been raided by Nebuchadnezzar. The prophet says in the imagery of, animals are yoked, right? To attach them to the plow or attach them to the wagon. So I'm going to break that yoke that you're serving him. In 2 years, not only will everything come back to the temple that was taken away, I will bring back to this place King Yehonaniah, son of Hoiakim of Judah, the rightful king, and the Judean exiles who went to Babylon, declares the Lord. Yes, I will break the yoke of the king of Babylon. So now you're standing around there. You're not the king's court. You're not the priests you're just a hoi polloi. Who do you believe? Who are you to believe? They both claim to be prophets. Then the prophet Jeremiah answered the prophet Hananiah in the presence of the priests and all the people who were standing in the house of the Lord. The prophet Jeremiah said, Amen. May the Lord do so. May the Lord fulfill what you have prophesied and bring back from Babylon to this place the vessels of the house of the Lord and all the exiles. But just listen to this word which I address to you and to all the people. The prophets who lived before me and you from ancient times prophesied war, disaster, pestilence against many lands and great kingdoms. So if a prophet prophesies good fortune, then only when the word of the prophet comes true can it be known that the Lord really sent him. In the past, prophets usually talked about bad things. And clearly those bad things happened. You're saying something good, all right, we'll believe you when we see it. Don't rely on his word until we see it, because he's not in that same tradition. All right, now, earlier Jeremiah was told to put a yoke on his neck. There's a symbolic enactment of bowing to the Babylonians, and that's why this word yoke is being used here. But the prophet Hananiah removed the bar from the neck of the prophet Jeremiah and broke it. And Hananiah said in the presence of all the people, thus said the Lord, so will I break the yoke of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon from off the necks of all the nations in 2 years. And the prophet Jeremiah went on his way. After the prophet Hananiah had broken the bar from the neck of the prophet Jeremiah, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah. So, God doesn't speak to him right then and there. He has to wait later on for a vision from God. Thus said the Lord, go back to Hananiah. Thus said the Lord, you broke bars of wood, but you shall make bars of iron instead. For thus said the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, I have put an iron yoke upon the necks of all those nations, that they may serve King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, and serve him they shall. I have even given the wild beast to him. And the prophet Jeremiah said to the prophet Hananiah, listen, Hananiah, the Lord did not send you, and you have given this people lying assurances. Assuredly, thus said the Lord, I'm going to banish you from off the earth. This year you shall die, for you have urged disloyalty to the Lord. And the prophet Hananiah died that year in the 7th month. So at least Jeremiah has the last word here. But what Jeremiah is bringing up here is the difficulty in ascertaining who's a true prophet and who's a false prophet. That's in part why eventually prophecy has to die away. Because it's easy for people to claim to be speaking for God. And that's why the rabbis, for the most part, believes that prophecy ends around the year 330 of the, before the Common Era, around the time of the entry of the Macedonians under Alexander the Great into the Middle East. Jeremiah sends letters to the exiles, promising that God will bring them back eventually. But he says, thus says the Lord of hosts, God of Israel, the whole community which I exiled from Jerusalem to Babylon, build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat their fruit. Take wives and beget sons and daughters, and take wives for your sons and give your daughters to husbands that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there, do not decrease, and seek the welfare of the city to which I have exiled you, and pray to the Lord in its behalf. For in its prosperity you shall prosper. The idea to the Jews throughout history, you pray for where you're living, even if it is in a state of exile. For thus said the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, let not the prophets and diviners in your midst deceive you, and pay no heed to the dreams they dream, for they prophesy to you in my name falsely. I did not send them, declares the Lord. For thus said the Lord, when Babylon's 70 years are over, I will take note of you, and I will fulfill to you my promise of favor to bring you back to this place. So we have this. We don't know how much we have of the various prophecies, of the words of the prophets. That's because only in Jeremiah do we have reference to writing down any of the prophecies. And indeed, the reference to writing down the prophecies was sent to the king, and the king burns that scroll. And then Jeremiah dictates it again to his secretary. That's the sole mention of a recording of the prophecies. And when you go through the books of the prophets, you see that sometimes the timeline is jumbled up. And one prophecy obviously is in time-wise doesn't belong there. Ezekiel is the only prophet said to be outside the land of Israel who created issues for the rabbis. So they said whenever he had his visions, he was brought to Israel to have the visions. So, but he also talks about the rebuilding of the temple and certain aspects of that temple, and those were problematic because that's not what took place in the second temple. And so the rabbinic tradition was to assume that he's talking about the third temple. That takes care of the problems of his prophecies not working. We know that the various prophets not plagiarized, but were certainly influenced by others. The famous prophecy of Isaiah, building the swords into plowshares, and the spears into pruning forks, was also said by another prophet. We also know that this idea of theater is the best way, that Jeremiah has the bars around his neck. Isaiah is told to give his children special names, like Shar Yashuv, the remnant shall return. It goes so far that the prophet Hosea, this is one of the, quote, minor prophets, Where is it? When the Lord, again, we're given a time, the Lord came to Hoshea, son of Beri, in the reign of King Uzziah, Yotam, Achaz, and Hizkiyahu of Judah. So it overlaps Isaiah, although there's no mention of either one in each one's book. Now listen what he's told to do. When the Lord first spoke to Hoshea, the Lord said to Hoshea, go get yourself a wife of whoredom and children of whoredom, for the Lord will stray from following the Lord. So he went and married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim. She conceived and bore him a son, and the Lord instructed him, name him Yezreel, for I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the bloody deeds of Israel, and put an end to the monarchy of the house of Israel, and that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Yezreel. She conceived again and bore a daughter, and he said, name her Lo Ruchama. What a great name for a girl to have, no mercy. For I will no longer accept the house of Israel or pardon them, but I will accept the house of Judah, and I will give them victory through the Lord their God. I will not give them victory with bow and sword and battle by horses and riders. After weaning Lo Ruchama, she conceived and bore a son. Then he said, name him Lo Ami. You are not my people, and I will not be your God. These poor kids had to bear the burden of this. And she is said to be an unfaithful wife. He marries her, emblematic that Israel is the unfaithful wife of God. Israel has gone whoring after foreign gods instead of being loyal to God. And so this is borne out, at least it's where it's described here anyway, when we can't know, maybe the prophet unfortunately had a bad marriage experience and he reads into it, this story. But the fact remains, the imagery of Israel spurning God and spurning the laws of the Torah are like an unfaithful wife. And there's some very language here that bothers a lot of people, but it was, I have to recognize when it came into being. Let's see. I want to touch a little bit more. The book of Jonah, also found amongst the Treyasar, the 12. We're all familiar with from the high holidays, and how he doesn't want to bring the message to Nineveh. Nineveh is the capital of Assyria, the future destroyer of the land of Israel. Now, you can hardly blame him for not wanting to bring that message. But it's an example where the prophet has no choice. When the prophet is anointed by God as a prophet, it's some power, something within him that he must express. That's the imagery that we get from the story of Jonah. Tries to run away, but he can't in the end. Right? Finally, the last prophetic book is that of Malachi. Right? Malachi, we don't even know for sure if that's his name. Malachi can mean my angel, my messenger. His message is to the people who have returned from the exile and have not yet lived up to what they should be doing. And he talks about the future days. You have spoken hard words against me, said the Lord. But you ask, what have we been saying ourselves against you? You have said, it is useless to serve God. What have we gained by keeping his charge and walking in abject awe of the Lord of hosts? And so we account the arrogant happy, They indeed have done evil and endured. They have indeed dared God and escaped. In this vein, those who revere the Lord have been talking to one another. The Lord has heard and noted it. A scroll of remembrance has been written at his behest concerning those who revere the Lord and esteem his name. And on the day that I am preparing, said the Lord of hosts, they shall be my treasured possession. I will be tender toward them as a man is tender toward a son who ministers to him. And you shall come to see the difference between the righteous and the wicked, between him who has served God and him who has not served him. For lo, that day is at hand, burning like an oven. All the arrogant and all the doers of evil shall be straw, and the day that is coming, said the Lord of hosts, shall burn them to ashes and leave them neither stock nor boughs. But you who revere my name, a son of victory shall rise to bring healing. You shall go forth and stamp like stall-fed calves. You shall trample the wicked to a pulp, for they shall be dust beneath your feet on that day that I am preparing, said the Lord of hosts. So this is apocalyptic vision, which is common towards the end of the prophetic era and is certainly something that exists in the period of time in the last few centuries of the before the Common Era and the first few centuries of the Common Era. Be mindful of the teaching of my servant Moses, whom I charged at Horeb laws and rules for all Israel. Lo, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before the coming of the awesome, fearful day of the Lord. He shall reconcile parents with children and children with their parents, so that when I do come, I do not strike the whole land with utter destruction. So here we also have the introduction that the prophet Elijah, who in the Book of Kings is said not to die, but is taken up in a chariot to heaven, will proclaim before that great day. And he then becomes associated with the coming of the Mashiach, of the Messiah, that Elijah is going to announce the coming of the Messiah. And so in the New Testament, that's the role that John the Baptist has to fulfill, building on that tradition that had developed from the story in the prophet Malachi. And so the section of prophets all contains warnings that misdeeds will not go unpunished, that you have to make sure that you care for the weak of the community, that you follow the rules of the Torah. Only then can you have hope. If you don't, then destruction will come your way. All right, so next week we're going to look at the last section of the Tanakh, the Ketuvim. Okay. Any questions anybody has out there? No? Got it all down pat? You know the difference between Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Isaiah? Yeah. The Haftarot on Shabbat morning, the more come from Isaiah than any other source. That is the major source of the Haftarot. Okay.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
You're welcome. See everybody next week.
Hi, Rabbi. She's
Hi.
making sure, this is Maya speaking.
Yes, Maya.
I got in connection a bit late today. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure you wrote me down.
Yeah, I saw that you made it in there. Okay.
Okay. Thank you
Very
so
good.
much. See you next
Okay.
week.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Rabbi, I sent you the attendance of the
Yes,
last
I
2
I
weeks.
see
Okay,
that
you
in
got
the-
it? Okay, great.
Yeah, I got it.